up party people, Zen here, and I just finished a 100% playthrough of Final Fantasy VII Remake, which means finishing hard mode including all side quests, collectibles, and secret bosses. Here's my spoiler-full review as well as my thoughts on the game's divisive and some say controversial ending. I was only 11 years old when I was introduced to the world of JRPGs with Final Fantasy VII, but I didn't play it on the PlayStation, I played it on the PC, so that was 1998. And because it was my first, it left the most lasting impression on me, and just like many people who have played the original, I was super excited for the remake to come out. With that background out of the way, let me talk about my 90 over hours with the game. I'm going to break down my review according to the top 3 categories of things that I loved about the remake, namely the graphics, the music, and the battle system, and then I'll talk about everything else I liked or disliked about the game. Well, almost everything else. First of all, the graphics. What can I say? It's a game that came out in 2020 and it shows. It looks miles better than Advent Children, which, looking back at AC, I'm surprised that it hasn't aged particularly well. Next, the lighting effects in the remake are some of the best I've ever seen in a video game, with little details like Barrett's upper arm lighting up with accurate light and shadows when he's firing his gun. They also play a lot with the camera's depth of field during cutscenes to give the game a more cinematic look and feel. That's basically introducing background blur, which I guess is the standard in video games these days. One thing I also noticed is that the camera can overexpose when you step from inside a dark room to the outside. That's something that happens to cameras in real life, but totally unnecessary in a video game. So they're introducing these kind of things to try to make you forget that you're playing a video game. I love that they put even a little thought into small little details like this. Oh, and on my second playthrough, I did it with the Japanese voice acting on, and then I thought to myself like, wow, that's a lot of lip movements to animate. Then I learned that Square Enix use AI to automatically generate facial and lip movements to match the language spoken. That's pretty cool.
Looks like we're officially on for tomorrow night then.
Die nächste Mission. Sie soll morgen starten. Tu sais ce que ça veut dire? On part en mission demain.
That's not to say that the graphics were perfect throughout the entire game. Almost all the cutscenes are beautifully rendered in the Unreal 4 engine, with attention given to little details like the scuff marks on Shinra soldiers' helmets and the eyelashes on your favorite waifu. You could tell that this game was made with love. But why do I prefer the in-engine cutscenes compared to the fully 3D animated cutscenes you see every once in a while? The main characters look more real in-engine versus the super clean look of the animated cutscenes. Like, where are the textures on their faces? Also, I'm pretty sure it's to save resources on the PS4, but when the camera goes a certain distance away from the characters, the level of detail on the character models drop. It's not ugly per se, but the inconsistency feels a bit jarring sometimes. Speaking about inconsistency, what is up with the flowers in this game? It's strange that I'm nitpicking about this because the majority of the game has such amazing graphics, and some scenes and set pieces totally punch me in the gut with how beautifully they were rendered. For example, I couldn't help but stop and admire Sector 5 from the rooftops when you escape from the church. Add in the music, the voice acting, and the dialogue, this was seriously my favorite set piece in the entire game. Or when exploring wall markets, bustling in grimy alleys. Or when you visit Aerith's house for the first time and you see her flower garden, god damn it, those flowers again, ah! I'd also like to give a shout out to the designs of the monsters and bosses in this game, and I was surprised at how many of those enemies were updated for the remake. Yeah, especially the Hell House. The bosses are also all super fun to play against, but I'll save those comments for my thoughts on the battle system later. Next, the music. I don't know about you, but before lo-fi hip-hop became the internet's favorite music to study or relax to, Final Fantasy soundtracks were my jam. I never even played some of those games, but I would definitely recognize iconic themes like Music Box from Final Fantasy V or Vamos a la Flamenco from Final Fantasy IX. But FF7, being my first love, was the one I listened to the most. The original FF7 gave us 85 tracks according to the official soundtrack, while the remake brings with it 180 tracks according to Square Enix's website. And I know that quantity is not quality, but within those 180 tracks there are a ton of jams, including updated reorchestrations of songs you knew and loved from the original. There are also a bunch of awesome remixes, as well as a few new songs that I think are complete bangers. Now I'm going to talk about some of my favorite musical moments in the game. In Chapter 1 you get the epic bombing mission song. If you've ever listened to Distant Worlds, you'd be familiar with this arrangement, but when you're escaping the reactor, you get this track called Getaway, which is basically the same song, but rearranged in such a way that creates so much tension. It has a faster tempo, different motifs overlap each other, and the motifs get cut off earlier than you'd expect, leaving you out of breath. Speaking of awesome remixes of familiar tunes, my favourite has got to be Smash 'em Rip 'em, a fun, modern EDM version of Tifa's theme. This song plays at Don Corneo's mansion when Tifa and Aerith team up for the first time. Score 1 for the ladies. On a similar note, the battle theme got an EDM remix for the squad game, and how does it sound so damn good? They also updated the Genova theme to be more orchestral and ominous, complete with a choir giving it a similar feel to One Wing Angel. But I didn't quite like it because, to me, the most iconic part of Genova's theme, the arpeggios, were missing. I guess they were going for a different kind of epic, like church epic versus rock concert epic, and then this happened.
Okay. Now this is what I'm talking about. Yes! The music.
Bring it on. Taking over.
This is a Genova theme, I remember.
Square Enix, you got me going there. There were a few completely new songs that I love too, such as Midnight Rendezvous, which plays when Aerith leads Cloud back to Sector 7. I don't know how else to describe this song other than it's sweet, warm, and nostalgic. I like to think of it as an alternative musical theme for their relationship. It even has an undertone of heartache because it plays right after Cloud gets a premonition of Aerith's death. One new song that I felt didn't have a right to sound as good as it did is Hand Over Hand. It plays when you're doing this monkey bar puzzle in the Shinra building. It starts playing as you're exploring the area, but when you actually reach the monkey bars, the music pumps up a whole other level.
Hand over hand, huh? That's fine. Bring it on.
It's just a small segment, but why does it sound so good? There are lots of moments like this where the music transitions in pace with what's happening around you, and each time it happens so seamlessly, it really helps to elevate the atmosphere of the game. Not forgetting too is the introduction of so many character-specific themes that previously did not exist. For example, Avalanche, Jessie, and even Johnny of all people get theme songs. In the game, you can also collect discs to be played in the jukebox, and these are all remixes of tunes from the original game, except Midgar Blues, which, funnily enough, has both an English and Japanese version depending on what language you're playing in. While a few of these songs are quite meh, like Hip Hop de Chocobo, others like Tango of Tears sound fantastic. Wasn't this song played when you lost the Chocobo race in the original? There better be a dance minigame in part 2 with this song. I could go on and on about how much I love the music in this game, so I'll stop while I still have your attention. I still do, right? And now let's talk about the battle system. I have never had this much fun with combat in a Final Fantasy game. Just going up against the Guard Scorpion, there were 4 different phases with varying attack patterns. There were weak spots that you had to target, and you had to hide from its tail laser. And this was just the first boss in the game. And I'm glad they kept the same level of complexity for almost all the bosses in FF7 Remake. Every time the boss went down, I felt a sense of achievement. All of them are challenging, but not to the point of irritation, and they're also satisfying to beat. My first ever defeat came at the hands of the Hell House after battling it for 20 minutes, and I wasn't even mad because I was having so much fun. The stagger mechanic was also a brilliant inclusion as it adds a whole new dimension to combat. Especially in hard mode, exploiting bosses' weaknesses, attack patterns, and beating them up when they're staggered becomes that much more important. You really can't go far by button mashing alone. And if it weren't because I enjoyed the boss battle so much, I highly doubt I would have bothered with an additional 50 hours to go for 100% completion of this game. There's just so much depth to the combat. I was still learning new things even during the final chapter in hard mode, for example using Cloud's counter stance to properly defeat some of the bosses there. Of course, when I say learn, I mean learning from other videos on YouTube. Now let's compare that to the original FF7. Because skills and spells were so easily transferable due to the materia system, there isn't very much difference who you use in combat. You just put the highest level characters in your party and be done with it. But that's not the case in the remake. Cloud, Barret, Tifa, Aerith, they all play so differently thanks to the wide variety of abilities that they can learn. The game makes sure that you try out all of them too by including challenges where you use only one character, as well as creating scenarios where you have to use different permutations of the main 4 characters. Even equipping a melee weapon on Barret unlocks different abilities that completely change the way he can be played. Without a doubt, FF7 Remake could have stuck to the ATV system from 1997 and fans would still be happy with it, but they didn't. Instead, they went on to create what I believe is the best combat system a Final Fantasy game has ever seen. In fact, I don't think I have any complaints about the battle system, but if I really wanted to nitpick, aerial enemies are particularly annoying to deal with. Also, in one of the challenges, I had Aerith going up against a phantom, but the moment I cast a spell on it, it cast Reflect on itself and became immune to magic attacks for the remainder of the battle. But Aerith can only deal magic damage, so I guess I have to restart the fight and make sure I don't cast spells? That's dumb. And this one isn't exactly about the battle system, but I hate how much time it takes to manually upgrade your weapons. The screen takes a while to load and it's slow. Thank goodness for the auto allocation option. Why can't they just have stuck to normal menus? Okay, so those are the 3 big things I really loved about the game. Now let's move on to everything else, including my thoughts on the ending. A lot of people were initially skeptical about how Square Enix might handle the Midgar storyline since it was only like between 5 to 8 hours of the original game. I personally think they handled it quite well. First of all, although the original game depicted Midgar as a huge metropolis with hundreds of thousands of inhabitants, you can only explore a very small part of it and mostly just the slums. Which was a shame because Midgar had such a cool concept. A city owned and run by an evil mega corporation with the rich living on the upper plates and the poor lived in the slums below? Sounds great, but you only get 5 to 8 hours of this. Now move on to Calm. Whereas Midgar in the remake feels like an actual living, breathing city. You get this impression from the get-go, from the intro video alone. When the camera pans backwards to reveal the logo, man, this video gives me goosebumps every time. Chapter 4 was also a great opportunity for us to see what life on the top side looks like, which is to say it looks absolutely and delightfully normal. Again, the original didn't show us much in the way of life on the plate, so seeing this and having topsiders react to the bombing and the fall of Sector 7 helps to remind you that people living in Midgar, even though they're on the top side or Shinra staff, there are lots of regular people too. And these all feed back to the feeling that Midgar is an actual living, breathing city. However, because of the expanding storyline, there were some parts that definitely felt padded, increasing the game runtime without actually adding very much in terms of story. I didn't like Chapter 6, which had almost zero story payoff. Yeah, you learn a bit about how Shinra gets light down to the slums below, but that's about it. And the whole deal with sabotaging the Airbuster in Chapter 7 felt completely forced. They could have gotten away with merging Chapter 6 and 7. Likewise, Chapter 13, where you explore an underground Shinra lab as well as going back into the sewers. On the plus side, you do get a boss fight with just Tifa and Barret, which I guess was kind of fun. Now let's talk about the voice acting. The main characters, in my opinion, were perfectly cast. Everyone sounds great. Barret sounds like the tough mofo that he is.
Sector 7. Then it was you who killed all those people.
Tifa sounds mature yet vulnerable.
Our home? And everything else.
Aerith is confident and sassy.
A lot, huh? One date ought to do it.
Our main man Cloud is calm, cool and collected, yet still able to convincingly pull off amazing comedic moments such as this.
Nailed it. I know. Thank you. Moving on.
I love that delivery.
They all sound like the characters we knew and loved from way back then, and the voice acting only served to amplify their personalities even more. Even the side characters sound on point. Jessie's so delightfully flirtatious.
Mind coming over tomorrow night? My roommates should all be out for a while.
Don Corneo is an over-the-top sleazeball.
Shy little kitten. Shimmy on over and give daddy some sugar.
Hojo's voice actor nailed the evil scientist archetype.
Fauna was elegance, right down to her cellular structure.
Even Red 13's voice sound perfect.
A glimpse of tomorrow if we fail here today.
The only voice that disappointed me somewhat was Sephiroth's. He just didn't sound as menacing as I had hoped.
Let us defy destiny together.
Back in 1997, 1998 in my case, if you wanted to enjoy FF7 in its full glory, you would need a walkthrough. How else would you know how to breed a gold chocobo and get the Knights of the Realm materia? During my first playthrough of Remake, I made the conscious decision not to refer to any walkthroughs at all. Despite that, I never got lost in an area or felt like I missed out on any key items. And to be honest, it's kind of refreshing having a game that's quite linear and not having any FOMO. It also helps that after the game has ended, you can just go to chapter select and go back to areas that you have done previously. And speaking of endgame content, hard mode is a whole other level altogether. Bosses that used to be a cakewalk now require a lot more strategy to beat. And all of a sudden, those boxes become your best friend, since there isn't really any other way to replenish your MP while halfway through a level. Hard mode also gives you the scariest, most challenging bosses to beat. Even with the assistance of online guides, I had to redo this battle many times before I succeeded. Meanwhile, I've seen speedruns online that cut through these bosses in less than 4 minutes. Yikes. And when you're replaying the game in hard mode, some of the lines that Aerith as well as Sephiroth say make a lot more sense, having seen the ending. Which finally brings me to my thoughts about the ending. I have to admit, when I first saw the Whispers, I hated them. They look totally out of place and made no sense being in Final Fantasy VII. I understood that expanding the story meant that things might not happen exactly as they did in the original, but these ghosts seem to show up at the randomest of times. For example, while I understood that the Sector 7 plate had to fall to stay true to the original game, having the ghosts be the ones that stopped the team from saving the day kind of annoyed me. And then Barret suddenly gets stabbed by Sephiroth, which shocked me, only to be saved by a Whisper minutes later. What kind of a Deus Ex Machina bullshit is this? They are also just so inconsistent. For example, Witch was supposed to have died when the Sector 7 plate fell. So why did the Whispers wait until the Shinra building to seemingly get rid of him? And while we're on that subject, how did Briggs get out alive? And I still don't understand what magic or mechanism allowed the team to go into the Singularity to defeat the Whisper Harbinger, but you know what? I'll suspend my disbelief on that. What's clear to me is that having defeated the Whispers, the story of the remake is no longer completely bound by the events of the original FF7. And that to me is exciting. Almost everyone who played the original, me included, probably came into the remake thinking that it was going to be a fun nostalgia trip with some of the lore being expanded. Now, anything goes. I can't wait for part 2. While the ending of the remake might not have been perfectly executed, I am definitely surprised. In future installments, I'm sure that most of the story beats from the original game will remain the same. Going to the Gold Saucer, the Temple of the Ancients, that scene, and so on and so forth until you finally beat Sephiroth. But now things could happen differently. Maybe Dyne doesn't commit suicide and gets reunited with Marlene. Maybe Diamond Weapon actually reaches Midgar. Or maybe, which is what's on everyone's mind, you could finally save Aerith. Here's what I think. Aerith's death was the emotional heart of the original FF7. It was absolutely heartbreaking that she was robbed from you so early in the game. If you remove such a powerful moment from the remake, I feel that it cheapens her death in the original. What I think will happen is that Squeenix might actually build up your hope and they make you think that you could actually save her. Maybe what Sephiroth said will come true. Maybe you will get 7 seconds to change the course of the story. Maybe you will succeed. Maybe you get a couple more chapters with Aerith in your party. Then, when you least expect it, Sephiroth takes Aerith away from you again. Now that would definitely surprise the fans. While we're talking about theories, I think it's quite clear that Aerith and Sephiroth somehow have awareness of what happened in the original timeline. Like how she knew that Cloud was a soldier and a mercenary, or that Barret is Marlene's father, and when she hesitated in explaining what she thinks the Whispers are when they were escaping the church. But I can't think of a straightforward explanation for how this version of Aerith or Sephiroth came to be. I was thinking that maybe the planet sent her spirit back in time or into this timeline, but the Whispers are the will of the planet, which means that the planet is sending Aerith to disrupt the planet? That doesn't make sense, right? Anyway, it'll be another 2 or 3 or more years before the next installment comes out, so we'll have plenty of time to theorize by then. Of course, the ending also hinted at the possibility that there's an alternate timeline where Zack lives. I doubt the living version of Zack would ever cross paths with the version of Cloud that we currently know. But maybe we could have a B story or a what if scenario where Zack lives and maybe Cloud and Zack form a mercenary company. But I personally don't think that the FF7 storyline would be well served by having multiple timelines or intersecting of timelines, so I really hope that they avoid that. In summary, I am quite happy with the direction that the story is taking, but I remain cautiously optimistic about how Square Enix might handle it. because let's face it, the whispers were not very well executed at all. However, I'm going to close one eye on this because we defeated the whispers in this game, so whispers shouldn't be in the next installment, right? I hope not. Anyway, to start wrapping up, FF7 Remake could really have been just a nostalgic cash grab by Square Enix, as a simple way to get more money out of the fans. In an age where remakes are the norm, I'm looking at you Disney, going off script or having an original idea is quite bold. I can only keep my fingers crossed that they stick the landing in the next game, because I've had my fair share of terribly executed endings in recent years. Blech. So on a scale of 1 to Zen, I would give Final Fantasy VII Remake a 9. Now I feel like replaying the original. It's like $10 on Steam. Oh, there's also an iOS version. Alright, you've reached the end of the video. Thanks for watching, guys. Did you enjoy the remake as much as I did? What are your thoughts about the ending and future installments? And did you replay the original right after playing this? Leave your comments down below. And did you like this video? I normally don't do gaming content, but I enjoyed Final Fantasy VII Remake so much I felt the need to do this. Usually I react to a cappella music videos with my wife and baby, and I also have vlogs dating back to 2013. Check them out if you have the time. Finally, do give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. It will be very much appreciated. Bye!